Hey everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. This time around, we're looking at the weekly security dossier from February 21st, 2025. Seems like they've got a little bit of everything in here. We've got some news about a new Mac malware variant, talk about the rise of cybercrime, even a book recommendation about leadership in there. And we'll also be looking at some resources that you can use to improve your own security, like an open source incident response program pack.
Yeah, quite the mix this week. What I'm really seeing in all this is, you know how all these different things really point to this bigger picture? Cybersecurity is not just a tech thing anymore. It's really a part of national security, economic stability, even like ethical questions about new tech, like AI.
That's a really good point. So let's dive into some of this stuff. Let's start with something that might hit a little close to home for some people, Mac malware. That's right, Microsoft researchers have found a new variant of the XCSSET malware, and this one targets macOS. Yeah, and this new variant's even more sophisticated. Like it uses this enhanced obfuscation, which basically means it's harder for your antivirus to detect. And it's also gotten better at hiding itself. It makes it harder to get rid of.
So for those of you out there who thought Macs were immune to malware, you know the whole that's a PC problem thing, might want to think again. No operating system is 100% safe.
Yeah, that's the truth. No matter what system you use, you got to stay vigilant and keep your software up to date.
Speaking of staying vigilant, you remember the Salt Typhoon breaches from a while back? Well, there's an update. The U.S. government has identified one of the hackers responsible.
Oh, yeah. The Salt Typhoon attacks, those were big. They went after all sorts of industries and government agencies, and they were really sophisticated, very coordinated. So, yeah, identifying one of the hackers is definitely a step forward.
There's always a but, right? Catching one person doesn't mean the whole operation is shut down.
Exactly. These cybercrime groups.
Yeah.
Especially the ones tied to nation states. They're often huge, well-funded, and they operate across borders. So taking down one person, yeah, it's a win, but it's not going to completely stop them.
It's like trying to play whack-a-mole with these guys. You stop one attack and another one pops up somewhere else.
Okay, so let's change gears a bit and talk about something that affects everybody. Financially motivated cybercrime. A new report from Google shows that it's on the rise, big time. It's actually surpassing state-backed attacks when it comes to sheer volume. You might be thinking, so what? How does this affect me? This is a big deal for a few reasons. First off, it means that cybercrime is becoming more professionalized, more focused on making money. And the economic impact of this could be much bigger than we realize. Think about it. When businesses get hit with these attacks, their costs go up. And who ends up paying for that? Consumers. Prices go up. It can also stifle innovation. Companies might be less likely to invest in new technologies because they're worried about security. And maybe most importantly, it erodes trust in our digital systems. And, we rely on those systems for everything these days.
So even if it doesn't feel as dramatic as some nation-state espionage campaign, the impact of financially motivated cybercrime can be pretty huge.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings us to another headline, one that shows just how vulnerable even big players in the cybersecurity world can be. Cisco was recently breached by the Kraken ransomware group. Cisco, the cybersecurity giant, known for their security products and services. Does this mean that even the experts are having trouble keeping up with the bad guys?
It definitely shows that no one is immune, no matter how secure they think they are. In Cisco's case, the attackers got into their internal network, and they leaked sensitive data, usernames, SIDs, password hashes, things that could be used to compromise their systems even further, or even target their customers.
So what's the lesson here? What can businesses learn from this?
Complacency is not an option. Organizations need to be proactive about cybersecurity, and they need a multi-layered approach. Strong network security, regular vulnerability assessments, incident response planning, and most importantly, employee training.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the people using it. You need to build security-conscious culture. And speaking of building a strong security posture, let's talk about a new resource from OWASP, that's the Open Web Application Security Project. They've released a guide that addresses the security risks of AI agents, specifically the ones using large language models.
Yeah, this is a really timely guide. Given how fast AI is being adopted everywhere, it highlights the unique risks that come with these AI agents. Things like memory poisoning, where an attacker messes with an AI's memory to make it behave differently. Tool misuse, where AI tools are hijacked for malicious purposes. And even intent manipulation, where the AI is tricked into doing things it wasn't supposed to do.
So it's not just about AI becoming self-aware and taking over the world, it's about bad guys using AI for their own gain.
Exactly. And this all ties into the bigger conversation about AI safety and ethics. As we build more powerful AI, we need to make sure they're secure and that they align with our values.
So how do we balance innovation with responsibility? It's kind of uncharted territory, isn't it?
It is a tough question, but there are resources to help us figure it out. Like, for example, there's a community-driven project that offers an open-source incident response program pack.
This sounds like something that any organization could use, no matter how big or small.
That's the beauty of it. It's got a bunch of tools, templates, and guidelines to help organizations build effective incident response programs. Covers everything, from defining what an incident is to outlining the steps you need to take to respond effectively. It even has templates for documentation, which is so important for learning from incidents and getting better over time.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive. Where can our listeners find this?
It's open source, which means it's free for anyone to use. You can find it on GitHub and on other online cybersecurity platforms. We'll be sure to include some links for you.
Fantastic. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we've got a book recommendation for you, Leading What Matters Most by Phil Gildart.
This book might not seem directly related to cybersecurity, but it's about something crucial, the human element. It talks about how important strong leadership is for driving organizational change, especially when it comes to building a security-conscious culture.
So it's not just about firewalls and passwords, it's about people.
Exactly. The book emphasizes how important it is to have open communication, to empower employees and create a sense of shared responsibility. These are all key for effective cybersecurity.
I totally agree. You can have the best tech in the world, but if your people aren't on board, it's not going to be very effective. We'll be back in just a moment to continue our deep dive into the weekly security dossier.
Welcome back to our deep dive into all things cybersecurity. Now, before we jump into the next topic, I wanted to circle back to something we talked about earlier. The whole human-centric approach to cybersecurity, especially when it comes to incident response.
Yeah, incident response is often seen as this purely technical thing. Like it's all about firewalls and, frantic coding and stuff. But it's actually a lot more than that.
Right, right. When I think of incident response, I kind of picture like a team of tech wizards huddled around these blinking monitors in a dark room. Is that even close to reality? Well, there's definitely some of that, especially when you're right in the middle of an active incident. But to do incident response effectively, it takes more than just technical know-how. You need teamwork, communication, and a solid plan.
And that's where that open source incident response program pack comes in handy, right?
Exactly. It gives organizations a framework to build a really solid incident response program. It covers everything, like what even counts as an incident, and then it outlines the steps you need to take to respond effectively. There are even templates for documentation, which is super important for learning from incidents and improving your response over time.
So it's like having a playbook for handling security incidents.
Okay.
No more scrambling around in the dark.
Exactly. And like we said, it's freely available. It's like a community effort to make everyone more prepared for these things.
That's awesome. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I want to touch on something we mentioned before, the human element in all of this. It seems like it's this constant race against cyber criminals, and technology is always changing so fast. But if people are the weakest link, like they say, how do we make them stronger?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. But I think it all starts with awareness. We have to educate people about the real threats out there and what could happen if they're not careful.
So education is key. Like, make cybersecurity part of everyday conversations, not just something that the IT department deals with.
Exactly. It has to be part of the culture of an organization.
Right.
You need buy-in from leadership,
Right.
ongoing training for employees,
Mm.
and clear communication about policies and procedures.
It's kind of like wearing a seatbelt. You can't just tell people to do it. You have to explain why it's important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People are more likely to do the right thing when they understand the reasons behind it.
Makes sense.
It's about giving people the power to make good decisions about their online activity and making them feel confident that they can protect themselves.
So education, empowerment, making it relevant to people's lives. But the threats are always changing, right? How do we keep up with that?
You're right. Things are constantly changing. And one of the biggest trends we're seeing is that cyber attacks are getting more sophisticated. Attackers are using things like AI and machine learning to make their attacks more automated and harder to detect and defend against.
So the bad guys are getting smarter, faster, more organized. What can we do to stay ahead of them?
We need to invest in more advanced security tools for sure, but technology alone isn't enough. We also need to develop the skills and expertise that people need to stay ahead of these evolving threats.
So it's not just about having the fanciest tech, it's about having the right people who know how to use it.
Exactly. And that brings us back to education and training. We have to equip people with the knowledge and skills they need to identify threats, assess risks, and respond effectively.
It sounds like cybersecurity is becoming less about technical skills and more about strategic thinking.
You got it. It's about understanding the bigger picture, seeing the potential vulnerabilities, and coming up with solutions to mitigate risks.
It's like a game of chess, isn't it? You're always trying to think a few steps ahead.
That's a great analogy. And in cybersecurity chess, the stakes are really high. Cyber attacks can have a devastating impact on individuals, businesses, even national security.
So it's not just about protecting our data, it's about protecting our way of life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today, from the details of incident response to the bigger implications of cybersecurity in our digital world. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to think about. So, given all that we've talked about, the rise of AI-powered attacks, cybercrime getting bigger and bigger, what skills and knowledge do people need to navigate the future of cybersecurity? What should our listeners be focusing on to stay ahead?
Well, that's a tough one. It's like trying to predict where a hurricane's going to go next. But I can tell you this. A few skills are becoming more and more important. First off, you need to be able to think critically and creatively. Be able to analyze complex systems, see potential threats before they happen, and come up with innovative solutions.
So it's not just about knowing the tech, it's about thinking outside the box.
Exactly. We need people who can connect the dots. People who understand not just how an attack works, but why it happened in the first place. That means understanding the psychology of these cyber criminals, their motivations, what they might do next. It's this really interesting mix of technology and human behavior.
So it's less about being a coding expert and more about being a digital detective.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that brings me to another important skill, communication. We need people who can bridge the gap between tech folks and everyone else. People who can explain complicated stuff in a way that everyone can understand. Help people get why cybersecurity matters so much.
So cybersecurity pros need to be good teachers too.
Exactly. Because cybersecurity isn't just an IT problem anymore. It's everyone's responsibility, from the CEO to the newest employee. Everyone needs to understand how they can help protect their organization and themselves.
That makes sense. So we need critical thinkers, good communicators. But things change so fast in cybersecurity. How do we keep up?
That's where the most important skill comes in, being able to learn and adapt. Cybersecurity never stands still. There are always new threats popping up. So you need to be curious, eager to learn new things, and be able to adjust to whatever comes next.
So you're always learning in cybersecurity.
You got it. The best people in this field, they're the ones who never stop learning. They're always reading, researching, going to conferences, trying out new tools and techniques.
Okay, so to wrap this up for our listeners, if you want to succeed in cybersecurity, you need to be a critical thinker, a great communicator, and someone who's always learning.
That's a great summary. And I'd add one more thing. Cybersecurity is a team effort. No one can do it all alone. We need people with different skills and perspectives to work together.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about getting the best minds together to solve these tough problems. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the newest threats to the skills you need to stay ahead, it's been a great deep dive.
Yeah, it has. Hopefully our listeners feel ready to keep exploring cybersecurity.
Absolutely. There are tons of resources out there, online, in your community. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Connect with other people who are passionate about cybersecurity. Remember, knowledge is power.
Couldn't said it better myself.
All right, that's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, stay safe online, stay informed, and stay curious.
And keep on diving deep.